Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, November 19th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today we have a number of celebrations, and so first we'll go to the Metropolitan Cathedral of San Juan in San Juan, Puerto Rico, because there we celebrate Our Lady of Divine Providence, Nuestra Señora de la Divina Providencia. It was on this day, in 1969, that Pope St. Paul VI declared her the principal patroness of Puerto Rico. Now, the statue has a very long history there. It was towards the end of his term as bishop that Gil Esteve y Tomas ordered a statue of Our Lady of Divine Providence from Spain. He had served there as a vicar before being ordained a bishop. The image was installed on January 2nd of 1853, and so for many years, the Feast of Our Lady of Divine Providence was celebrated on that day. Now, the statue of Our Lady was canonically crowned on November 19th, 1950. And when Pope Paul VI proclaimed her the patron of the island, the patroness of the island, as we said in 1969, he moved her local feast to November 19th to coincide with Puerto Rican Discovery Day. Likewise, we can go to Venice, where we celebrate Our Lady of Good Tidings, at least Father Orsini calls her Our Lady of Good Tidings. It seems like this might refer to a feast of La Madonna della Salute, which is really Our Lady of Health and not Our Lady of the Salute. In any event, the tradition itself is quite a simple one. There's a procession that goes to the Basilica, and they revere the depiction of Our Lady. It was through her intercession that a particularly bad plague of 1630 in Venice was ended. Likewise, this feast seems to actually be held on November 21st, but Father Orsini listed it as today. You can celebrate both days. Finally, on November 19th of 2011, we have the approval of the Holy See of the naming of Santa Maria de Coromoto, Our Lady of Coromoto, as the principal patroness of the Archdiocese of Caracas. If you recall, I believe we celebrated her a couple weeks ago, but no matter. It was in 1652 that the Indian chief Coromoto and his wife were crossing a stream when they saw a lady of extraordinary beauty who said to them in their native language, "Go to the house of the Europeans and ask for baptism." So a man just happened to be walking by, and the chief asked him what had happened. And so the man, Juan Sanchez, the man who he encountered, asked Coromoto to go with his whole tribe so that Juan could teach them everything that they needed in order to be baptized. Well, so the whole tribe went and was baptized, except for Coromoto, because he didn't want to lose his independence and his authority. So Coromoto wanted to escape, but as he was leaving, Our Lady appeared to him and his whole family again. So there's differing stories at this point that the chief either shot an arrow at her, right, and Our Lady disappeared, leaving Coromoto with a piece of paper with her image. And another account says he also tried to grab her, and in his attempt at grabbing her, he was left with her image. In any event, the chief Coromoto fled into the forest, but a poisonous snake bit him. So then he went to the mission and asked for baptism, and as soon as he was baptized, he was healed, and then became an evangelizer for his people. So we can say, Our Lady of Coromoto, pray for us. For today's reading from True Devotion to Mary by St. Louis de Montfort, we continue with part 2 on the most excellent devotion to our Blessed Lady, or the perfect consecration to Jesus through Mary. We're in this sort of bridge between section 2 and section 3, and we're talking about this figure of the consecration and the history of Jacob receiving the blessing of Isaac through the offices of Rebekah. If you remember earlier, we heard a list of criticisms examining the actions and conduct of Esau, and then today, St. Louis de Montfort is going to compare these actions with Jacob, right? So the first one, we were told that Esau the elder was strong and robust of body, skillful with the bow and in chasing game. As to Jacob the younger, we read in point 191, first, he was of a feeble constitution, meek and peaceful. He lived for the most part at home, in order to gain the good graces of his mother Rebekah, whom he loved tenderly. If he went abroad, it was not of his own will, nor through any confidence in his own industry, but to obey his mother. The second criticism that St. Louis de Montfort raises of Esau, he says, Esau hardly stayed at the house, and putting no confidence in anything but his own strength and address, he worked only out of doors. Well, in point 192, Louis de Montfort tells us that Jacob loved and honored his mother. It was on this account that he kept at home. He avoided everything which could displease her and did everything which he thought would please her, and this increased the love which Rebecca already had for him. The third criticism that St. Louis de Montfort made of Esau, he took little pains to please his mother Rebecca and indeed did nothing for that end. On the contrary, speaking at 193 of Jacob, he says, Jacob was subject in all things to his dear mother. Jacob obeyed her entirely in all matters, promptly, without delaying, and lovingly, without complaining. At the least token of her will, the little Jacob ran and worked, and he believed everything she said to him. For example, when she told him to fetch 2 kids, and that he should fetch them in order that she should prepare something for his father Isaac to eat, Jacob did not reply that one was enough to make a dish for a single man, but without reasoning, he did what she told him to do. Again, the fourth criticism that St. Louis de Montfort raises of Esau is that he was a glutton and loved eating so much that he sold his birthright for a mess of pottage. And 194, we see, he had great confidence in his dear mother, and as he did not lean in the least on his own ability, he leaned exclusively on the care and protection of his mother. He appealed to her in all his necessities and consulted her in all his doubts. For example, when he asked if instead of a blessing he should not receive a curse from his father, he believed her and trusted her, when she said that she would take the curse upon him herself. And then fifth, again the fifth criticism, Esau, like Cain, was full of envy against Jacob. And in point 195, he said, lastly, he imitated as far as he could, this is speaking of Jacob imitated as far as he could the virtues he saw in his mother. It seems as if one of his reasons for leading such a sedentary life at home was to imitate his dear mother, who was virtuous, and kept herself removed from bad companies which corrupt the morals. By this means he made himself worthy to receive the double blessing of his beloved father. So, and then in the next section, we will continue with this as St. Louis de Montfort compares this. Again, he compared Esau with the ones who are going to be condemned, and now he's going to compare Jacob with the ones who are going to go to heaven.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our Marian podcast. As St. John Paul II teaches us, from Mary we learn to love Christ, her Son, the Son of God. Through her intercession, may we grow ever closer to Him. We encourage you to share this with a loved one or friend and help spread our devotion to Mary. Thank you, and God bless.